Good afternoon. We on? All right. Let's go ahead and get started. How are you today, Guildhall? Yeah. We're excited. Yes. Is the mic not working? Hello. Test. Are we better? Better. There we go. All right. Now, so I was wondering why everyone was looking at me confused. Am I not as interesting as usual? At the Guildhall, we have our Game Changer series, which is when we bring in people who have had notable careers and brought interesting things to our industry. Today, we have Graeme Devine, who has certainly a storied past, and I'm sure you all remember his first game, 3D Space Junk on the TRS-80. Uh, and given that it was probably published before most of you were born, but maybe you've heard of some of his more recent things that he's worked on. Seventh Guest, which was, of course, one of the first CD-ROM full-motion video games. I say that because I was working on a competitive full-motion video game at the time, and we can argue about who shipped first. He's also worked on such notable titles as Quake, Halo, Age of Empires, been a part of not only the CD-ROM in terms of new hardware development, but also worked for Apple with their iPad launch and iPhone. And now, of course, is at Magic Leap again, looking to marry that same interesting design sensibility to hardware and software to do things that we wouldn't have imagined doing before. I know he has a good talk prepared for us. Originally said, first time presented it, so that's great that it can premiere here. Afterwards, we will have very little time for questions, but we will have a little bit. There is a microphone here, so when it comes time, please stand in line there on the mic so folks watching on Twitch can participate as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Graeme.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me okay? Let me go switch to my slides. Yay! Well, thank you for having me here today. It's been, I think, 6 years since I've been at Guildhall. So it's been a little while. Back 6 years ago, I helped a lot when Guildhall was just starting and got to see the first programs come through, and it was really exciting to see back then, and it's even more exciting to see that today. So today I'm going to talk about game design. About game design where I feel it's kind of off the rails a little bit, and talk about kind of what's going on. But my job title is Graeme Devine, Chief Game Wizard at Magic Leap. What does a Chief Game Wizard do? A Chief Game Wizard at Magic Leap goes around all of our offices and kind of looks at what people are doing with the device, because people are making all sorts of things. They're making batteries and optics and laser things and things that sense rooms and LiDARs and cables and GPUs and CPUs and SDKs and all sorts of run times that keeps the device going. And I challenge them to think about what's it like when you put the device on. What do we do when I first put the device on? What does it do? What's the first thing that the people want to happen? Because a lot of people just think about making the device and making the Magic Leap device. So I go around the offices and people call me the Wandering Wizard. And I go around and I talk to everyone. And I sit down and it's like, well, over in San Francisco, they're doing something like that. We should have a meeting and we should go and talk about how this works. So I've been at Magic Leap for 5 years yesterday. So, and we finally launched this summer. And I remember joining Magic Leap, sitting in the dentist office, which was next to a dentist office in Roni's office. And he was like, Graeme, there's an outside chance we could ship next year. I'm like, awesome. This is going to be the fastest. But no, it took us a while longer. Ronnie likes to say that you can't make a 386 in a garage, and you certainly can't make one next to a dentist office in a strip mall. So 3 offices later, 1 large factory later, we have the Magic Leap device. And I'll come back here in January with devices to show you all, and we'll talk about how to develop for it. But today, we're going to talk about game design and what's it like to actually make games in general. So this is kind of, because I've been making games for a long time. Let me get my thing started. So I've never given this talk before, so it could be really short, could be lots of time for questions, or it could go long, and you could all be, in sleeping bags. There could be points where it makes no sense, and I'll correct that for the next talk I do, so thank you for bearing with me. But we'll try and get through this talk and see how it goes. Connect. Do your thing. So I put this in front of every single talk I do. The only reason to give a speech is to change the world. And I really believe that. Because your time is valuable. You all are here to learn something that might change how you actually do things day to day, how you make games. And so it reminds me of how important your time is. And so I put that up in front of everything, because it's really important to me that I give you something that you could actually take away and do something useful with. I put my dogs into every talk now, because I am petrified on stage, and these are my spirit guides. And if you follow me on Twitter or on Facebook or anywhere social, you'll know that I tweet often about my dogs. And I tweet often about Bella, who helps me code. This is my coding partner, is the brown dog. And she stays up until 3 o'clock in the morning and helps me sort out how to code things, and has some great ideas, actually. Her best idea is always when I'm stuck on a problem, she's like, hey, Graeme, let's go for a walk. And you have no idea how good that advice always is. But she helps code, and then Callie is the Bernese Mountain Dog, and she just is there to love you and love you and love you. So when I thought about this talk, I thought about game design. I thought, well, what's the best game design lesson I can give? And the best game design lesson is really Super Mario for the NES. How many of you have played that? How many of you played it on an emulator? Wow. World 1-1. And the thing about that world is the very first world in Super Mario, the very first screen, tells you everything you need to know about level design. There's nothing more I can teach you. The reason it tells you everything is Mario starts out on the left-hand side, whereas he normally runs to the middle, so you learn to run right. You learn these question marks, that bump up, give you either coins or power-ups, mushrooms or fire flowers or invincibility. You learn those things from those. You learn how to jump on top of your enemies, kills them, and it gets you a turtle shell that's, sorry, I must not turn my head, I guess, that way. Gets you a turtle shell that can be used as a weapon and can actually hurt you. And you can go down a pipe, and sometimes there's some secret stuff down there. So really everything is taught to you in that first screen. In the second screen, you learn how to die. And we all learn how to die on that screen, because we're all like, what's down there? I went down the pipe. Well, death. You learn when the music goes faster, you're at the end of the level. And that game is back in the age when games didn't have large game teams or large design manuals. They'll teach you a lot about how to do anything. So in the first 2 screens of the game, we learn everything we need to know to play the game to completion. And that's kind of important, that introduction teaches you everything. We've kind of lost that in games lately, but Super Mario World 1 is kind of the big lesson in level design that I think we can all learn from. So thank you. Okay, guess that was a little quick. We'll go to the backup slides. So a long time ago, I've been making video games for 40 years. Started making games back in the 1970s. And this was my dev environment in 1983. So in 1983, the total number of people it took to make a video game was 1. The total amount of time it took to make a video game was about 4 weeks. And here's my dev environment, an Apple IIe, because I'd made some money by this point. I could actually afford an Apple IIe. Got a TRS-80 there. The dev system I was aiming for was a Sinclair ZX Spectrum. What was it called here? A Timex Sinclair. This is the cassette tape recorder that I back things up onto with my cassette tapes just lying around willy-nilly right next to a power supply. That's great. Floppy disks and a Sony Trinitron. And that was the entire dev environment that I had. And that's all I needed. And that's where I learned assembly code and where I coded games and where I made my first 5 or 6 games. I actually moved that desk into my first office, which was haunted, actually. I'm not sure if it was a desk that's haunted in retrospect, might have been. But that Apple IIe served me well for a number of years. And that was everything. I started making games because I wanted to tell a story. And I was very impressed upon by Battlestar Galactica, which in the UK was out in movie theaters and then became a TV series before it was rebooted as an even better TV series. Maybe, no, original was good. And I wanted to tell stories. So I bought myself a Viper model and built myself my little space sets out of National Geographic magazines with space backgrounds. And I built the model, and I took my Minolta camera, and I set up shots to go and make a movie. Because I was going to make movies as a living. That's what I wanted to do back then. And so I spent all this money, because back then you had to spend money to take photos. I spent the money to buy the film, and I spent the money to develop the film. And all these pictures came out. And back then, cameras had a viewfinder that was above where the camera actually shot, that kind of settled on a distance maybe 3 meters away of kind of the thing that you were aiming at. I'm taking all these close-up shots of everything. So all my pictures were all of like above the Viper of basically my bedroom. None of them were really usable in terms of making a movie. They were all terrible. And that was the end of my movie career. But I had a TRS-80. And so I thought to myself, I can make movies on this TRS-80. And of course, the TRS-80 shipped with BASIC. And I remember typing in my first BASIC program, which poked, which put an address in memory to fill the screen, and I watched it ever so slowly fill the screen up, and it took maybe 20, 30 seconds to run through those, 40 by 96, pixels on the screen. And then I wrote it in assembly code, and it did it less than a second, and so I must learn assembly code. But story is why I make video games. So if I think about story, I think about going back to campfires, which is really where story started. And story started here because this is the way humans evolved. We are actually here today because of our ability to tell stories around campfires and actually pass knowledge on. And those stories that, that people tell around campfires, ghost stories or stories about whatever, have infinite resolution. Their resolution is so good, I can tell you there was a ghost in the woods that came out of the mist. And all of you in your heads now have a ghost in the woods coming out of the mist of the best resolution possible. No graphics card can beat that. And if you're sitting in the woods, your hairs will be standing on end. Might not now, because I'm scared. But campfires is kind of where it started. My first campfire was this. This, in case you don't know, is a DEC VT100. It is the best computer terminal on the planet, even today. It has the loudest darn keyboard ever, and it connects up to a computer called a PDP-111 or a VAX-11 780. It runs programs like Fortran, COBOL, and that's basically it. It connects to the mainframe via a 2400 board connection, which was RS-232. It's a big 25-pin connector, and it was fantastic. And I learned how to program the crap out of that. I learned Fortran, I learned COBOL. I still know COBOL, unfortunately. And I learned how to make all the lights go on the display. But one game in particular got my attention on this thing before I could even learn how to program. And that was adventure. And I've just now noticed there's a spelling mistake in the very first word. Which I really got to go back and check the source code to see if that's there. And so growing up, when I was 7 or 8, I'd go to my dad's office where the BT100 was, and I would sit and play the heck out of Adventure. Infinite resolution. I'm in a colossal cave. I love the fact that it says some of the objects have side effects, i.e. there is a rod in the cave that scares a little bird. And you know you're going to need that rod. To do what? Scare a little bird. Those things were wonderful. And I sat and forever played that. And eventually I worked out how to go get the source code for Adventure and look it down and break it down. That thing's about 300 lines of code. It's hardly anything. It's mostly the database at the bottom full of all the text. Almost nothing. And it shocked me that so much could come from so little. So many hours of joy. And that, to me, that time was one of the best tools for telling stories. And along came Zork 1 from Infocom. And Infocom formed as a company that started to make text adventure games. And they made a whole bunch of great ones. And Infocom, really took text adventure to a whole different level than has been seen before or since then, really. And from there, adventure kind of span out. All the way from text adventure to kind of, beginning of 2D adventures with King's Quest. Maniac Mansion from Lucasfilm Games. Was that LucasArts? Was that Lucasfilm Games? Seventh Guest, my game. Missed by someone else. World of Warcraft, which was the first adventure game, which still gets played today. I still play it. Level 118. One of the first massively multiplayer games. There was MUDs before that, and there was EverQuest 1 before that, but not a lot that was super successful. To Mass Effect and Skyrim. Mass Effect and Skyrim are seen as the best storytelling games we have on the planet today. And I disagree. I think Adventure was better. Hold on. So let's look at the history of my games a little bit, because I can criticize those ones freely. Seventh Guest. This was hugely high resolution when it came out. You kind of roved around this haunted house, and you kind of got to play yourself. The part you played was kind of called Ego, or id, and you roved around kind of as a ghostly form, and you watched video unfold in front of you. So it told a story, but you weren't really in the story until you kind of worked out at the end, maybe I'm Tad. Yeah, you are. But you don't actually get to play Tad. You don't actually get to make interesting decisions as Tad. It's a puzzle game. You unravel what's happening via puzzles. 11th Hour, much of the same. Way better graphics. Went from 256 color all the way to 16-bit color. Have you ever had to deal with 256 color programming? Anyone? Wow, you should totally do a class on that. Because learning how to use a Woo quantizer and do cool things is definitely cool. But 11th Hour had, same idea, same puzzles. Clandestiny. I love Clandestiny because I love Scooby-Doo. Clandestiny was my ode to Scooby-Doo, and now I had an animation company in Korea making my animations for me, and how awesome is that? Now I tell awesome stories with awesome cinema. And really, I'm taking the user more and further away. Halo Wars. I'm really proud of Halo Wars. I got 28 minutes of CGI in Halo Wars. And it tells an awesome story about the Spirit of Fire and that crew, and I love those characters. I love making those characters. I loved writing Serena, and I loved making that game. I love but you never get to play any real characters in this game. You get to it's an RTS game, so you kind of get to control how the game proceeds by winning RTS levels, and then the story will unfold some more, which is awesome. And then here's Mass Effect. Here is the best choice we give you in telling a story today. I see there are some people that disagree, but it's kind of the three options that we give you there are kind of the way forward, and people see that people were affected by the story. People felt the story actually changed them. They felt the choices because they were permanent, and affected the characters, and you come up and say, so-and-so will remember this for a long time, and it comes back and it's like, remember that time you blew my spaceship up? No, I won't give you any food. It did actually do things for story, but it was on such a railroad, and we call it the invisible pathways that the game designers put in of basically, we'll divide the game into 3 paths. We'll bring them together for one big scene, then we'll divide it into 4 paths. And by the end of it, yeah, the planet always blows up, I'm sorry. But that's really how we do games. And yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2 might have 272 separate stories built into it. And that's awesome. I can't wait to play that. It's going to be great. And I've heard people tell stories of how much they were affected by the first Red Dead Redemption. Tale of the Tomb Raider, the same thing. Spider-Man PS4, the same thing. What else just came out? Anyway, but those games all tell stories in very passive ways. So we've gone from, I'm the hero in adventure, because it was me with infinite resolution. My decisions, I'm in the cave. I'm going through the cave. I'm thinking about what I'm doing in Zork. I'm thinking about how to open that garage door in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Those games were all very personal about me trying to solve things. 2, I'm playing someone else. I am playing Master Chief. I am playing Lara Croft. I am playing some cowboy. I think games should be about me. I think games should be about happening to me and my decisions. And we should offer infinite decisions in terms of how games can actually proceed and go forward. And so we will talk about that. So now on to the actual talk, part 3. Let's talk about some history and 2 ideas, because I'm not going to say, oh my God, we do games wrong without giving you some ideas about what I think should actually fix them, because you'd all rip me apart on Reddit. So let's talk about a little bit of history about how story has worked across the years. Firstly, we're at a point of change in video games. And I call this through the looking glass, because we have 3 kinds of games that we design today. We have games for a long time have always been on the other side of a piece of glass, on the other side of a screen. And I sit with my joystick and I control Master Chief or I control Lara Croft, and those characters are on the other side of a screen in a world that is made completely by game designers, controlled completely by game designers. And they're awesome. They're graphically rich and intense. And I play in Azeroth and I can just go over the hills and look out at the ocean, and it's wonderful. I feel like I'm really there. Recently, VR games have started to take off, and I'm actually through the looking glass. I'm on the other side. I'm now there personally. I'm flying a Viper in Battlestar Galactica or an X-Wing, or commanding the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, or doing all the things I can do in VR. I have my 2 6-off controllers that do something different in every single game that I play. And I'm actually there and present. And then we're on the other side of the glass. We're in mixed reality. We've brought games through into the real world, so that now we have the ability to add photons, which are being directly into your retina, as if they're actually standing right in front of me, or standing right behind a table, or right behind a column, or on the other, walking through doors. And making games that way in our messy, messy world to me, myself. So 3 different types of games, all perfectly valid, all perfectly cool. So I put this in lots of talks because we have way too many definitions of realities. We have VR, you're very familiar with that, on the other side. Augmented reality, which generally places information on top of the world. Doesn't really comprehend it, doesn't really comprehend chairs or Coca-Cola bottles or images in the world to do interesting things with. It really kind of creates just information that goes on top. And then we have mixed reality, which adds context to the world. Digital content interacts with the real world and with you. And that's kind of important, because we have this handy-dandy definition of mixed reality that we don't really follow in any mixed reality game that I've seen, in any mixed reality content that I've seen. Mixed reality is the mixture of the real world and virtual world so that one understands the other. This creates experiences that cannot possibly happen anywhere else. and I put this into lots of talks too because I don't think anyone really pays attention to it. I think everyone, when they run into go and make a mixed reality game, they just think, I'm going to make a screen, and it's going to be a virtual screen on a wall, and I can watch movies. I have a really awesome TV set that does that. I'm about 2 seconds away from watching Netflix anytime. Am I going to put a headset on to watch Netflix? You can scroll the web. You know what? I got an iPad. It's really awesome. You can chat to people. I have messages, Twitter, all these cool things. No, mixed reality is interesting when it understands and comprehends the world. When I look at things in the world and it adds context to it, and it interacts directly with my world, then mixed reality is interesting, because I'm doing things that can't happen anywhere else. And so I think about what happens when I put the device on, and I see the world with the ability to add photons. Should I just add photons willy-nilly and go change how the world looks and do different things? No. I should change the world so that adding to it creates interesting context for the world I'm already in. Can I add story to that? Certainly. So we'll talk about that too. So this picture is often used to show that the world has not really changed. That back in the 1930s, people got on trains and read newspapers. And they weren't very social on trains, apparently, because they all sat and read newspapers. But it is very different than the world we're in today, because they are reading one of 3 newspapers. They're reading the newspaper from their local town. They're reading the newspaper, a national newspaper. What's the other one? Reading one of 3 choices that they had, at the newsstand, basically. Very few choices on newspapers that they read. And so when they're there, the only choice they have to talk about that newspaper they're reading and that article they're currently reading is to the person next to them. That might be their neighbor, might be someone completely a stranger. And there's only 3 places that really have exchange: at home with their family, traveling, on the train, talking about the weather and this report they read in the newspaper, and at work, around a water cooler. That phrase, used to be true. We still use the phrase, but no one really gathers around a water cooler anymore. So exchange of information was very different than we have today, because today we have this. And I've seen this. I've even seen this at Benihana's, which breaks my heart because there's a guy throwing knives up in front of you and everyone's on their phones. And it's just crazy. But here it might look like the same thing, but these people are doing something very different. They're not chatting to each other. They're chatting, they aren't reading one of 3 newspapers. They're reading a news site that they find agreeable to them. They're reading Fox News or Huffington Post or some news site that they agree with. They're talking to friends that agree with them. They aren't talking about diverse points of view. This creates a bias in our world. And it creates a very real bias in our world, because I live in a bubble of just living with things that I agree with and talking to people I talk to, instead of people at that table, around a table, those strangers on a train or around a water cooler at work. And so I bring this up, talking about game design, because I believe game designers are one of the few people that can fix this. That can fix this bias and take it away and begin to reintroduce people into being present in the world. And I believe it's important that we do that. Pull away from this, world of just this very comfortable world and back into the real world. So now we have this. And I'll come back in January, I promise, with lots of devices, and we'll all try it out. We can all shoot invaders and go and play Tenandi and go, do all the things. But spatial computing is, I think, one of the solutions to bringing people back into the world, because you're no longer looking at the phone right in front of you. You're up looking in the world. And it's very easy to recreate what's on the phone. But we have to remember, the phone is awesome. I love my phone. What we create up here on our heads has to be very different. We shouldn't just recreate the same game designs we've had before. We shouldn't recreate the same kind of feeling that we've had before. What we create should be something incredibly new. So if we look back at media, how media has changed over the years, it's kind of interesting. Back in the 1800s, most homes had musical instruments because that was the only way to hear music, was to play a musical instrument. You know, growing up, you know, my grandmother had a piano. You know, my uncle had a trumpet. And you just don't see that anymore. And that's because in around 1895, what I call the first atom killer came out. First atom killer was a record player. And now all of a sudden you could buy this record player, this gramophone record player, as it was called at the time. It would spin at, whatever it would spin at, 78 RPM or something. That would play back music that was recorded somewhere else. And I no longer needed to own my own musical instrument. I could now play music. And so these record companies, they started to do well. And it wasn't until the 1960s and 70s that they kind of peaked and started to peak out. But it really started in 1895. It was somewhat replaced by the radio, which is the second atom killer. And I cut this picture particularly because of that doll on top of the radio. It creeps the heck out of me. Why would you put that doll up there? What is the purpose of that? That's creepy, right? But this thing killed off, it killed off record players because now I could just turn the radio on and listen to music. And this is key because the record companies realized that they were not actually in the hardware business because the other thing that they made besides record players was records. They actually realized that they were in the software business. And so record player companies sued radio stations for royalties on the records they were playing on the radio. And they won. And all of a sudden, the record companies realized the valuable thing that they had was not the player, but the software, the music. And they earned a royalty stream from those record players. And they started to, from the music, and that's kind of the model that we still use today. Meanwhile, over the radio, starting out, they just kind of played music, one radio at a time. They would commentate on sports games. It would take until the 1930s and 40s for the radio drama to come into its own, where they would serialize things like Flash Gordon before it went to the silver screen. On the radio, and people would tune in every night to hear the adventures of Flash Gordon. It took 10 years to find kind of that comfortable contract. Radio went from 2 in 5 homes in 1931 to 4 in 5 homes by 1938. It was really popular. Of course, TV killed that. Another atom killer. It killed the radio. And it was seen by the movie industry as a huge threat. People were blacklisted if they actually had dared to appear on a TV show. That's only just recently changed. First TV sets started to come out in 1930. They had a total of 48 scan lines, very similar to a TRS-80. By 1942, there was a total of 5,000 TV sets, in North America. War really upset the total number of TV sets that we were in. But by 1947, there was 40 million radios in North America and 44,000 TV sets. The thing about TV sets was 30,000 of those TV sets were all around New York City, because only New York City had the broadcasting towers that were able to broadcast TV signals. So TV kind of really took off from the East Coast. The next atom killer, arcades. This is basically where I grew up. Every day, after school, every day. I'd go play these games and I'd go try to program them. I'd go play defender, play pole position, play breakout, play kung fu, play anything, put 25 pence in, or 20 pence, or 10 pence, however much it was in the UK, and play the game. These things killed pinball tables. Pinball tables used to be the big things that you play in arcades, but along came video arcade games. They're easier to service. They got more money. The games were shorter, and they were interactive. And they killed off pinball tables more or less overnight. But each of them had a unique interface. You didn't use the same interface for Pac-Man that you used for Defender, that you used for pole position, that you used. Every single game had its own unique way of input. There was no common form of input, but there was no controller that you picked up and kind of had a common controller. Until the console came out. This is the 8-bit NES that came out in Japan. I should have had the Atari VCS up here because I know how to program that. But the Atari 2600 was introduced in 1977. And its big thing was that back then, homes only had one TV set in the living room. And there was no way to record TV shows. There was no TiVo. There was no DVR. There was not even VHS or Betamax wasn't out yet. So if you plugged in that Atari 2600, you weren't going to get to watch Star Trek or the news or anything else because you couldn't record it. And generally only one TV set. So you plug that in the back, you'd have that switcher that switched to the channel 3 or back to the regular antenna. And you'd play in a house something interactive on a TV set. And really, it amazes me that that actually worked. The parents didn't kill consoles right there because they like the news. They like soap operas. They like these things that we interrupted. And I think back then, probably a lot of second TV sets were sold in the kids' rooms, amongst the more affluent members of society. These killed the arcades. And the arcades died away. In 1977, we had a standard controller, up, down, left, right, fire. By 1986, when this came out, we had A, B, up, down, left, right going on. Nowadays, we have left trigger, right trigger, bumper, bumper, analog 1, analog 2, D-pad, A, B, A, B, A, B, X, Y, right? And trigger, trigger. But when we pick up any game now, we kind of have a comfortable contract. We know when we move the left analog controller, that will move the camera around. We know when we move the right controller around, that will move the character around. We know when we hold, move the right trigger, that will do the most dominant thing in the game. And so I can pick up any game and more or less be confident in playing it right away. There might be other things I have to go do and learn. There might be other ways to go do it, but I can at least start. I can at least start to see that. That comfortable contract took 20, 30 years to get there. It didn't start right away. We started in arcades. And so now we have VR and MR. And in VR, you typically have two 6-off controllers that are given to you that you can't see, that you're holding in your hand, and someone generally has to point out where the buttons are, and you have 2 analog controllers on each of them and triggers. And every single game, every single experience, there's a different way of doing stuff. So there's no you put the thing on, I don't feel comfortable in VR. I don't know what it is. There's no comfortable contract yet for me to know how to do things and how to actually move around and how to actually have locomotion even, and how to go from A to B. The solution's being found. VR's awesome. Love VR. But that comfortable contract of picking up 2 6-off controllers and knowing that's how things work does not exist yet. And that's okay. It takes a little while. We'll find it. We'll find our way forward, and slowly we'll become more familiar so that more and more people experience VR and love it. Because I like flying Vipers. I like being, commanding the Starship Enterprise. But because VR replicates the world, it's a little bit more complicated than what we're seeing with consoles. It might take a little bit longer. So when I see people say VR is not a success, I'm like, well, it's probably sold as well as the Atari 2600, if not even better. It's a huge success, the fact that it's even out there and in Target, you can go buy a PlayStation VR. That's pretty darn awesome. It's just not the big success people want yet. It's not Red Dead Redemption 2 money. But it'll get there. Mixed reality, my thing, is even more complicated because we're with you in the messy world. Holy crappers. How do you have control in there? I mean, we give you a 6-off controller that lets you move around and do things. But we also have gaze, what your eyes are looking at. We also have blink, we have head pose. We have, talking, we understand what things are saying. Basically we understand, gestures, when you put your hand out to go hold, go do things, it understands gestures and gesture movement. Holy crap, and every single MR experience that I've tried, guess what? Completely different interface. First few minutes, it's, how to go use what we're doing in MR. That's fine, that is awesome, we'll find our way. There's nothing wrong with that. But we're just at the beginning of, at the beginning of the track. There's nothing there yet to find that, go find that comfortable contract. In both VR and MR, we don't have good concepts around game design yet either. A lot of what we're taking is learned from the consoles. And how can we apply this into MR? How can we apply this into VR? And we know that's not the right way to go. We didn't take radio and try to apply it into TV. It took TV a little while to find that's comfortable contract. It took until the 1960s with Bonanza and Rockford Files and Columbo to go find that comfortable contract of an episode. And the episode where it starts, everyone's happy and in a good position, and we're all on the Starship Enterprise and feeling good. Whoa, things happen, ship almost explodes, bad thing's gonna happen. Happy ending, we're all good, and we're joking about it and having a cup of coffee. That's every single episode of Star Trek right there. And yet we're fine with that. We love that comfortable contract. And so we're a long way off finding that for VR and MR, because we're just beginning. So, oh yeah, I promised some ideas. How are we doing for time? Yeah, fine. So, excuse me, right before I started at Magic Leap, I was about to launch a Kickstarter. And I got actually pretty far along in it. And I'm going to tell you about it today for the very first time. This is the Kickstarter that I was going to launch. We were even about to make a video. We were all done. We were all lined up. We were in production, actually, on models and everything. And I still love this game design. I still think it's quite valid. It's called The Last Train. And I built it around the idea of, what if we can make something happen around you? And so I started out by thinking, how can I make things happen to you in person? How can I make things happen to you by yourself? So I tried an experiment where I told some friends that back when I was at Trilobites, I had recorded the news because one of our, Callum Beck was the guest weather forecaster for the night. And there'd been a segment on the news about a train. And it was about a ghost train that roved around. And it had been known about for since the train tracks had started. And it roamed around and it stopped occasionally and picked someone up. And they were never, ever seen again. And so I told people that I'd watched this tape, and I watched it again, and I found, I looked it up on the internet, and I found out about how the government knew about this, and how things, that they would close off train tracks, and the Dallas station was closed on the 14th of August, 1922, which it was. You can go look these things up, and you can go, add history in about how things are happening. And so I told people that I'd found this warehouse in Vegas full of comics and vinyl records and books and old things that kind of documented this train. And I sent this email to them whilst I was in Vegas. Oh golly, it's hot here in Vegas. Can't wait to get back home. Lots to tell you all. I took a bunch of pictures of the locker, but my phone got stolen along with my laptop. My hotel room was robbed, nothing taken apart from the phone and laptop, so I guess I'm getting that new Nexus 6 and MacBook Retina after all. Hey, it's still true. Laurie's pretty mad at me, that's my wife, but I'm staying at the hotel, nice hotel, which is normally pretty nice. Sorry, pretty down about all of that will happen soon. But the locker, it was real. Too hot to get to in by day, I went down at night. It's full of old stuff. I'm not sure how it relates to the train yet, or even if any of it is relevant to making the game. Because I told people I'm making this game. but it should all be packed up and it's on its way to Florida. There was even some old vinyl records, leather-bound books, comics, postcards, newspapers, some game setter things, a bunch of newspaper clippings and magazine pages. Going to the address of the Barcelona I got for Johnny Yesterday. Johnny Yesterday was played by George Sanger, the Fat Man, and he really got into the whole thing as well. We're mostly working on the plan for the game and refining costs. This isn't going to go out until I get an idea on overall budget and what we're asking for. We'll write more once I'm back in Florida. Now, I hadn't actually gone to Vegas. There's no locker. But I sent an email out, went home, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. And my wife picks it up. And my wife's like, yeah, he's right here. He's fine. What do you mean? Yeah, no, he's good. He's good. Graeme, were you in Vegas? Like, no, he's good. And Neil Stevenson was very concerned when he got the email and thought that I was off my rocker and that maybe I had actually gone to Vegas, was suddenly sitting in a hotel room in Vegas, breaking into, he thought it was real. He thought I'd done this. So before we get to the game, let's talk about the definitions that I use in making the game. Multimedia used to mean this, the seventh guest. It was, we called it a multimedia game because it existed on CD-ROM, and it was multimedia because it had FMV and whatever that means. But it was a term that kind of stuck. Multimedia now means today kind of App Store, Steam. But does it? Can't multimedia mean App Store, Steam, comic books, pictures, what's on Twitter, what I find on the web, books, records, Facebook, social, everything? What if I was to make a game that did everything? That had social elements, that had Twitter, that had, people have tried this, but no one's ever really tried it on such a scale that I was about to attempt. I was making comic books from the 1950s, as if they had been printed in the 1950s, telling tales about, about this train and someone who'd gotten off the train and had magical abilities. I had a record, a vinyl record by Johnny Yesterday, telling songs about the future from the 1970s. And it was all vinyl and, inside the 12-inch case, cover artwork and everything. Had photographs of trains from all over, of sightings. Had websites that both said, this thing is crazy, it's just by some game designer. Oh my God, it's not real. And I had things saying, oh my God, the last train is real. The government's closed down the railroad here today for some unknown reason. Oh my gosh. And I had books written by Matthew Costello, who was seventh guest, that told the story of turn of the century, when the railroads first started, about these large underground bunkers the government had built, underneath on top of some of the mountains where the railroads used to go through. The railroad barons actually built. That you would try to capture the lost train to find out what it was actually about. The thing about conspiracy theories is there has to be some grain of truth in everything that you do. In social media, I started to contact social media people to write up both good aspects and bad aspects about the lost train. And so I started to work on a video game that was just another aspect of the overall experience. And as you would start to play the game, you would be followed, and your phone would tell you to get up and move. Twitter would start to tweet at you and tell you, we know who you are. It's best to get out of the way. Facebook would start to address you and have posts. Fake news before there was fake news. Comic books would have answers to puzzles in them. The record playing backwards had interesting things to go and do in the book that was from the turn of the century. But it was all happening to you. You were being chased. You were being, sought out. You were the investigator. You were actually driving down and finding out about all these things. So I often talk about the need to have time machines, because I'm trying to make something seem real that happened in the past. And thankfully, here's my time machine. There's a number of commercial models. now, with what we can do today in terms of digital, we can make things real as if they were in the past. We have the ability to go print books, to make records, to make comic books. 20 years ago, that was nearly impossible for someone to go do. Even burning a CD was like a near impossible thing to do for Seventh Guest. But now, media is actually very easy. And so this is often called urban legends. And so my idea was to launch that Kickstarter upon making this urban legend appear to be real and inviting everyone in the world to come help me find the last train together. And if you back the Kickstarter, you got the record, you got the comic book, you got the book, you got everything that I found in the warehouse. And oh my gosh, you're just a few people. Unfortunately or fortunately, I joined Magic Leap. And I went on to make something in mixed reality instead. But I still think about the last train as I come up to every train track. I think as that train goes by, is that the one that's going to stop and let me on? Are the men in black following me? What's going on? So here's an example of someone else doing an urban legend and changing it. And it's all true up until a point. About the invasion of LA. All these quotes are true. I'm sure about that one. I couldn't find it. Seems true, seems believable, worth looking up Snopes on. Bunch of it's true, quotes are true, newspaper pictures true, newspaper articles true, UFO, maybe it's all a cover-up. I believe in UFOs. Conspiracy theories and drawing people into conspiracy theory and creating a new urban legend is, I believe, a very powerful way of making a game about you. And creating a game that happens to you directly, using all of your devices, all media available to you, to offer you more aspects that proves that this conspiracy theory, this urban legend is true, only draws you in further. And so, I still might go make the last train. And I used to talk about this to people all the time. And generally, I'd take people to coffee, and they would lean over afterwards and say, so is it true? Does the last train actually exist? Is that a real urban legend? Like, I don't know. But no, I made it up. Phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. Pretty powerful way to find out that, that you're either going crazy or on the wrong track. So multimedia, I don't think, is just a single CD-ROM. I think the last train is multimedia. But do I call it multimedia? Or do I come up with this term cross-media? Cross-media games. So these are games that don't exist, that can exist anywhere. You can have an MR version of Last Train, you can have a VR version, you can have a console version, but it is all about finding out what is true. Cross-media covers all of the previous platforms I just said. That's idea number one. Idea number 2. So I use this device a lot, and January, come back, lots of them. We have what we call the control, the light pack, lightwear. You put it on, and you add photons to the world. And one of my charges is, what do you do when you put it on? And I think a lot about what happens when I look at a Starbucks logo, what happens when I look at my business card, should I have apps? No, I don't think you should have apps. I think it should be an app-free world. The developer device is all about apps because it's a dev device. But in the future, I don't think we'll actually have an OS or that we perceive to be an OS like we have on mobile phones today. So here I think about a concept I call everyday adventure. I use an example I've talked about before, which is Ghost Girl. So how many of you have heard of Ghost Girl? 3. Okay, that's good. So back when we were first making it 5 years ago, everyone was really excited about screens, our ability to make Netflix appear on a Magic Leap device. And that is awesome. I should point out it is awesome, and it is really, really, really cool. But I was like, nah, I have a TV set. It's really cool. What can I do that I can't experience on my TV set? I can't experience on my Xbox. I can't experience on my phone. Those are the really cool things. And so I started to come up with a concept called Ghost Girl. And today we'll take a little bit further than I've ever talked about before. So Ghost Girl basically is a concept of an actual mixed reality game that uses these cubes in front of you. And as you're doing this tutorial, you're learning that you can form words with the cubes. And that you can actually do yes, no, why, make words up, and things happen to the cubes. But in the next room of your house, you start to hear noises and clunking and so forth. You start to hear things go on. Lights start to come out from that room, and lights start to appear and come out. Eventually, you get up, you walk into that room, and there standing in the middle of the room is a ghost, Alice. And she points directly at you, because we know where your eye gaze is. We know what you're looking at. We know that you're looking at Alice. And then she points onto the floor directly behind you. And so you look around on the floor behind you, and there is the outline of a dead body right on the floor in your own house, happening to me. And so I'm like, oh my God, why would you do that? Now I've got a dead body in my house. So I turn back to look at Alice, and she's gone. But in my ear, I hear, will you help me? And so I think back to the cubes I have, and I can start to go say yes, no, why would you do that? And start to have interactions with Alice. And Alice can help me do things. She can help me do magic tricks with playing cards. I can put these playing cards down, and she can show me how to do a magic trick in real time. So when my friends come over, I'm wearing a device, I'm doing a magic trick. Like, how do you know how to do that magic trick, Graeme? Well, the ghost standing there is telling me how to do it, actually, in real time. And she says, nice T-shirt, by the way. Because we know what your T-shirt says. And so I think about Alice the ghost as being a companion that I have all the time. I start to have adventures with. I start to have, everyday adventure. And what do I mean by everyday adventure? Well, I'm sitting on my couch watching Stranger Things, as one does. And on the couch next to me is Alice, my ghost, who is my constant companion in the house now. Alice is actually the person I talk to most in the world. Because I actually believe very soon we will talk to AIs that are actually personable, much more than we actually talk to humans. Everything you see with Siri and Google and Alexa, and stuff I've seen, scare you. But she's like, well, no one really calls it the upside down anymore. It doesn't really look like that. But in Stranger Things, they have this concept of a Ouija board, which, if you remember Seventh Guest, I loved Ouija boards. I loved that even the wallpaper was the same color as a Ouija board. It was actually really cool and well done. But put Christmas tree lights up, and under it, put A through Z. And Alice is like, let's go up to the attic and get the Christmas tree lights down. And put them up on the wall and write A through Z, or put post-it notes up underneath the lights. And we'll start to see if we can communicate with the other side. So I'm like, okay. So I put the Christmas tree lights up, A through Z, I turn the lights on. And now, because I'm wearing the device, I know where all the lights are, I know what all the letters are. And now, when I switch the lights off, through the magic of mixed reality, I can turn the lights back on one by one. And we can start to communicate with the other side. And we can start to have communications on the other side to do interesting things. Slowly, the story of Alice will unfold. That, and I've made you pick up your Christmas tree lights. So what sort of things can I make you go do that you wouldn't ordinarily go do that you can't do on a console? Well, already you're actually doing quite a lot of helping solve a murder, communicating with the other side. But one of the favorite things that I think about is, Alice can't leave your house. She's stuck inside your house. The boundary of the house is as far as she can get. And every night outside, her brother walks past the house at midnight, exactly at midnight. Her brother walks past, and you can see this out the window of your house. And Alice comes up to you one day and says, Graeme, at midnight, will you go outside in the middle of the street and tell my brother that I love him? And so I go outside at midnight, wearing a device, a mixed reality device, wait for a ghost to walk down the street to say that the ghost inside my house loves you. And that kind of connection cut, that's something, how do you go into work the next day and explain that? Well, why are you tired? Well, I stay up till midnight. There was a ghost walking down the street. The ghost that lives in my house it's the brother. It's complicated. So I call this everyday adventure. And what I mean by that is it doesn't need to be a ghost that lives in your house. I also think about the appless future that I have, where sometime in the future, and I'll use Star Wars because I love Star Wars, but it can be Harry Potter, it can be a new IP, it can be a ghost, it can be whatever. But I'm going to the airport to go somewhere else, and I'm on my way to the airport, and my companion is BB-8. And I'm like, BB, call me an Uber. And so BB calls me an Uber to take me to the airport, and a driverless car comes up because we're in the future. And I get in the driverless car, and BB-8 does his little thing. Hey, I'm a good flight guy. And I go off to the airport. About halfway to the airport, the car stops. And the C-3PO is standing outside. So I roll down the window. Hey, C-3PO, how's it going? And he's all like, you've got to take this thing and give it to the Rebel Alliance. They'll be at the gates when when you get off your airplane at your destination. So I'm like, oh, okay. I'm helping the Rebel Alliance. That's cool. And so I start to notice on my way to the airport, there's more and more Star Wars things, and I get to the airport, and the stormtroopers outside, and Red Empire things going through, and I'm getting on the airplane, and I look out the window, and there's X-Wings and TIE fighters fighting, and I land, and I get to the other side, and then at the gate is R2-D2. And I give R2-D2 this little thing that I got from C-3PO, and I've helped save the Rebel Alliance. This is the position of Luke Skywalker. And I've done something that, just as part of my everyday life, that's been part of an adventure, a quest in the real world. It doesn't have to be going to the airport. It can be going to Starbucks, going to school, walking down the road, walking my dog. All these things are possible. And I believe the future I want to live in is a future where everyday adventure happens as just part of my day. And I can turn it off, I can turn it down, I can make the world real, I can make the world unreal. But the world is more interesting to me when I no longer think about apps or starting that Uber app or starting that app up or doing that app, when the world has context to it because I want it to have context to it. And the world responds to me in the ways that I want it to respond because I ask it to. I ask my companion to help it respond. And so I believe that everyday adventure will be the way that we live our lives very shortly. Conclusions. Look at that, right on time. Iteration in a new medium is must. VR and MR, we're only at the beginning. Nothing is a success overnight. Atari 2600 came out in 1977. We're in 2018. Game industry finally here. Cool. Get a time machine. Commercially available models, you know where to find them. It takes time to kill atoms. And everything that we've worked on, or I've worked on in my lifetime, kills a previous generation of atoms. And so when you think about a game design, or a piece of hardware you're using, or something you're doing, think, what atoms am I killing? Because if you can't come up with any, you're not working on something that's going to be, I think, terribly interesting. And I believe everyday adventure will define our next generation of games. Finally. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Couple of questions. Yes. Well, I'll repeat it.
All right. So one of the things about technology, and I'm glad you went through these technologies, is it seems certain technologies take off when standards are adopted. Radio standards, television standards, DVD standards, and VR and mixed reality standards are all over the place right now. How do you see that, and what is your prediction for when all these companies are finally going to get together and say, if we want to make money, we've got to agree on a standard so that we can sell these stories down?
I think that's a very good question. Standards in mixed reality and virtual reality. One of my big pushes at Magic Leap is something called Image IQ and OpenMR. An Image IQ is the ability to have a unique URL associated with any image. Starbucks logo, my business card, Star Trek poster, whatever. And that unique URL is unique to that single image. All Star Wars posters, same thing as all Starbucks logo. And then OpenMR is the markup language that can attach to that image in the world and track off of it. And I believe a standard like that, where we have the DNS and HTML of mixed reality existing in mixed reality or in VR, is actually kind of an interesting place to start, because these are the pillars that built an interesting web. And we can take the web and try to apply it into VR and MR, but I think that gets you the web in VR and MR, and that's interesting by itself, but I think it takes a new way of doing things. And Image IQ can leverage deep learning in order to categorize things and then use actual recognizers to go recognize things. Those devices are lightweight because they just need to track images. And OpenMR is a standard language that can be used on any MR device. And I believe those kind of standards don't exist yet, but I think my belief is they're really important. Yes. Sure.
Hey, first off, thanks for the talk today. Amazing talk. I like the idea of cross-media. We've seen a lot of examples in entertainment nowadays. Black Mirror is one that I was drawing on a lot.
Yep.
It takes a look at technology and how social interactions interact with it. Also, movies like Nerve, for example. It just makes me think a lot about how you can tie in different cross-medias together and how you make that into a game. The question here is, like, how far can you go before you're passing the bounds of what is like socially acceptable for creating a game where you're essentially like hacking somebody's social media or getting into their bank account or things like that, sending out emails, making posts on Facebook, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very easy to cross that line. And we've seen that with, what was the game that came out from EA? It called you at 2 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. It was, I've forgotten the name of it. I believe we're still in the entertainment world. And I believe if it's not entertaining, if it gets past that creep out line, then that's just gone too far. I believe everything that I do needs to be entertaining. And so there'll be versions, I'm sure, that do too much. That's not for me. I'm in firmly, Scooby-Doo land. Yeah. That's where I exist. And so I think it's very easy to cross into Black Mirror land, but I don't want to live there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. Another round of applause, I think, would be appropriate. And I know we're a few minutes late for class, so I will send you off with the promise of a return trip in January with lots of fun toys to play with. Thank you all.